This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, we're drinking with authors, literary briefs. Woo! Okay, I'm Erica Lance. I'm your host. With me is
Vanessa Valiente.
And our guest is Jody Lynn Nye. Woo! Okay, we do rapid fire questions, but you were talking about just now history of New Orleans and stuff, and what's interesting, you said before about a situation that happened there, and real life is, to me, as a horror writer, more terrifying than fiction. I have a good friend named Mark Muncie, and what he does is he finds local legends. He's done it in Florida for 3 books, and then just did it up in the Adirondacks for another book that's coming out this year, where he takes the local legend and then goes through and finds out where the local legend came from.
Yeah, I know, Mark.
Sometimes it's cute, and then sometimes it's purely terrifying where the local legends actually came from. You know? Okay. So, we're going to do a rapid fire question. What is your favorite book of all time?
Off the top of my head, Gaudy Night by Dorothy L. Sayers.
Okay.
Why?
Because it culminates quite a lot of things that were going on in the rest of her series, and it takes place in Oxford, which I have always loved. And I love the characters of Peter Wimsey and Harriet Baen. And she is a novelist. So it's I'm reading about one of my own. But her writing is so beautiful. She died the year I was born, so I never got a chance to meet her. What a terrible pity that is. And I like her work so much. There are many other books that I like, but because that one came out first, I'll cotton to that.
Totally. What is your least favorite book?
I Will Fear No Evil by Robert Heinlein. It's the only book that I have torn up and thrown away rather than given away.
Oh my
I
goodness.
was so mad.
Why were you so mad?
Because of the representation of the main character is a horrible, terrible, miserly man whose brain is transplanted into the body of his secretary.
Oh, I already know where you're heading with this.
Yeah, it's just downright terrible. I love Heinlein. I really do. The Door into Summer is one of my favorite books. He's written so many other things that are just mind-blowingly wonderful. And that one I just couldn't, I don't know how it ends because I couldn't finish it. I threw it across the room and then I picked it up and I ripped it up.
I love that. I love the idea of, no, that's not enough. It's not enough that I chucked it. I need to shred it. Is there fire? Does somebody have fire right now? I actually need to up it another level.
Gasoline, bring me gasoline.
Yes. Do you stop reading then? I'm guessing yes. I know some people who can't stop. They'll just finish it anyway, but do you just stop and are like, you know what, I'm done.
You know what? I used to read all the way through. I did. I read all the way through, even to the end of terrible books. Part of me was hoping that that it would get better, and part of it was I don't quit. And then I realized I was giving good time away to something that wasn't worth my while. It wasn't worth finishing, and I do not have to do that to myself anymore.
I think that's exactly why I don't finish them. Like if I start, and I also am one of those people, I love that online you can get samples at the beginning of the book now. Because if you don't grab me in the first few pages of that book, I am not moving forward. I don't have the time. I have way many more things to do than,
Me, I use the Libby app, which is, you are able to check out audiobooks and ebooks from your local library without actually ever having to enter the library. And
I use Overdrive for the same thing.
Yeah, Hoopla is another one. They're amazing apps, and I find that is a great way to, like, if you don't want to spend the money and you want to see how this book goes, you kind of like, we'll read it, listen to it, and then only then will I go buy it. Is if I'm obsessed with it, then I'm like, okay, you need to grace my shelves. It has to happen. So, but I feel like the way things are set up now, it makes it easier to be like, you know what, I don't have time for this because I'm not jiving with this particular story.
Sure.
Do you listen to a lot of audiobooks?
Not many. I read faster than they do, so usually I get impatient with it, unless it is so beautifully presented that I can't resist it.
Mm.
Do you have books that you reread a lot?
I have several that I consider to be old friends, and I go back to them, especially when I'm feeling blue, or if I want to recapture a certain feeling. I have several that I go back to for that. Uh, it it is like having old friends around and say, oh yes, I love the way that made me feel. Oh, that was an incredibly clever piece of dialogue that I never stopped taking joy in, or that was a fabulous description, or I can't wait for this epic battle.
Mm.
Totally. Have you had a book make you actually laugh out loud while reading it? Because people talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
What is the first book you remember creating that sensation?
Oh, the first book? No, but I can give you one off the top of my head. It's called
Go for it.
Nightlife by Peter David. Not the revised edition, but the first edition of it, which was, oh my gosh, middle 1980s, 85, 86, about then. It is about what happened if King Arthur suddenly woke up in Belvedere Castle in the middle of Central Park,
Oh wow, that's got to be funny.
and runs for mayor of New York.
Oh, wow.
It's charming, but what made me laugh was one line in it in particular. Arthur goes to the lagoon to get he is given Excalibur. The Lady of the Lake rises up, and I won't go into detail because you really should get that for yourself. But a couple of junkies have been watching him, and
Oh.
That's epic.
they stagger over and fall to their knees in front of him, and he waits. And they say, "We swear eternal allegiance to the guy with the day-glow sword and the submersible girlfriend." I was reading this about 4 o'clock in the morning because I get insomnia, and I laughed so hard I woke my husband up.
That is epic. The first book I remember laughing out loud to was actually Sharon McCrum, and she wrote a book called Bimbos of the Death Sun.
Yep.
And it is, to me, we've talked old school nerd a lot. She nailed the conventions, the people at the conventions, and that's one of my old friends that I will go back to. I've given so many copies of that book away because it was one of the most brilliantly funny books. And I realized for me, unless you're a little bit in the community, it probably wouldn't have nearly the impact that it did when I was reading it, because I was like, these are my people, this would actually happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with you. That and Zombies of the Gene Pool, her other book.
Yes.
Yep.
The
I thought that was really well done. And I laughed at that too. There are many I've laughed at, but the first one that came to mind, of course, was Nightlife.
What is your favorite thing about doing panels? Like when you get up on panels, what is your favorite topics to talk about?
I'll talk about anything. I have done conventions for so long that if you throw even an unfamiliar topic at me, I will do my best. I'll wing it. And if nothing else, I will listen to the way other people are answering it, and I'll ask questions. So,
well, you talked earlier about a little bit of, you were going to originally go into film, and you, because of being an introvert, yet you're on all these panels and doing these things. Was there a point that it changed, that you felt?
No. I am an introvert, but I have never had stage fright in my life. I can walk up on a stage and sing, but as for going up to a stranger and introducing myself, can't do it. It's very, very hard. I have gotten practice in it over these many, many years of conventions. But the separation of the table between me and them, or the footlights between me and them, means an incredible amount. I know a lot of people who are very outgoing, and yet they can't get up on stage. They get terrified.
No, it's true. And I used to do a lot of theater and stuff like that, and I watch that happen where they're outgoing, or the shyest person gets up and has no problem being whomever up on stage and the foreigner, and you're like,
Mhm.
where did you come from? Because you weren't talking to anybody in rehearsal. What the hell? I think that's amazing. Do you get I call it fangirl moments, but like getting to meet like you, and it's just for me, I love that. I get excited about meeting people that I really admire and stuff like that. But I often wonder, does the scale ever tip when you're around all of these fantastic people? You've been around so many. Do you still have that when you meet somebody that you
Oh,
haven't met before?
absolutely, absolutely. And I have watched it in many ways and people you wouldn't expect. For example, I got to meet Janice Ian, whose music I've been listening to for eternity. She was a tremendous fan of Anne McCaffrey's, and I was a fan of hers and of Anne's, so that was an epic evening. And I ended up she's a tiny little lady, immensely talented in that voice. The two of us were sitting in the way back of a van because there weren't any more seats, and we were small enough to sort of sit cross-legged in the back.
That sounds like so much fun.
It was, but I was thinking, this is not happening to me. This is an amazing moment. But
Do
she's
you have
phenomenal.
that with other authors that you get to meet? Because you're meeting all these amazing people, being a part of the community you are.
Oh yeah,
I,
I
I
feel enormously privileged to hang out with Larry Niven, for example, who's amazingly nice. Uh, we Andre Norton. She brought me back into science fiction. It was it's a long story, and since you want rapid fire questions, it's not appropriate here. But I got to push her around the dealer's room at Worldcon in Orlando, Florida, because she had agoraphobia, and as if she said, if you talk to me, I'll be able to keep my mind off all the people around us.
Oh,
oh wow,
So,
that's really not awesome of you to do, though.
oh, absolutely. But it was a privilege, and we were in touch to the end of her life. She was 93 when she passed away. So I feel privileged to have, very privileged to have met her and gotten to know her.
Do you buy books at conventions from authors who set up tables that maybe are not on the New York Times bestseller list? Do
Yes, I
you?
do. Yes, I do. I was at TorCon. I think it was TorCon. No, okay. I'm going to cop to not remembering the name of the convention. I apologize, guys. I had a wonderful time. And I went around the room and picked up books from Canadian writers that I had never seen before. Because I said, oh, that looks interesting. I'd chat with them. I'd say, okay, so what's this about? Oh, yes, I must have that. So
mhm.
yeah, I do try out people's books. I
How
want
often
to
are
want to
you
know what's out there.
recognized by those people that you're buying from?
What about it?
How often are you recognized by them? How often do they have that moment where they realize Jody Nye is buying my book right now?
Oh, time and again, time and again. There are people who have no idea who I am, and I don't assume that they do.
No, I think that's great. I find that writers, regardless of the stature of the writer, again, for the most part, are some of the sweetest, most wonderful people, because even if they are a tremendously big deal, the ego is not in place the way it is a lot of times with other industries. And I'm not saying everybody, but I've just noticed that the writer community tends to remain more humble, I guess is the word, and recognizing the fans and how important the fans are to their experience.
Hmm. Well, I think if you are mean to your fans, you don't deserve to have any.
Oh, truth. I think also we all know it's hard, writing, getting published, whether you go self-publishing or traditional. And I feel like the ones who end up making it first, for the most part, are so generous with their time to help everyone behind them. Because the wonderful thing about books is there doesn't need to be one favorite. A reader can have 1,000 favorites. There's plenty of room for love for all these stories, and it's always nice to see, especially big names, go back and pay it forward to someone behind them, because it is difficult, and sometimes you need someone to kind of crack open the doorway a little bit just to help them get through.
Oh yeah, yes. And there are people who have give back in other ways. Sometimes they provide scholarships, or they provide a boost in some fashion of trying to teach young writers, even if they're not good at teaching writing, that explaining to them about how marketing works, and explaining to them, no, it's not just you, this happens to us too. Yes, 135 books later, it's still happening to this author or that author. There are things that we fall prey to that you wouldn't think would still be happening, but they do. And we can try and reassure them that, yes, you with your one book, or you with your 3 books, you're suffering from these things, but it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So I think information, or just opening your arms to someone who is new to the industry, makes a big difference to them. Piers Anthony always talked about the adult conspiracy, that that the adults are not going to let kids know about things. But if you stop with the adult conspiracy and you say, okay, this is what it is, please come into the fold, we welcome you, that makes a big difference to how they're going to feel about the industry and feel encouraged to go forward.
Yes, because in a way it's a solitary craft, but I think that now more than ever there's a community, and you have to remind people that there is a community out there. There are people to talk to. There, it's way bigger. Like growing up, I make this joke that it's like you went in a cabin in the woods with a typewriter, and maybe somebody brought you food every now and then, and you wrote the next great novel and all that stuff. And I'm like, and it's kind of like writer's block. Like people say, I grew up thinking writer's block was this thing that you just stare at the computer and not be able to type a word. And I'm like, that's not writer's block. Writer's block to me is life happening. And then I'm like, what, I'm just going to binge watch Netflix because I feel like doing that and eating ice cream for a while, because that's all I want to do. That's writer's block to me, is that I just like, life happened.
No, the other one is also writer's block. It's when your subconscious is saying there's something wrong with this and you have to go back and figure out what it is. But in the meantime, go away from it for a while, really, because your brain is working it out, and your brain, your subconscious is smarter than your conscious mind.
Yeah. I actually use when I guess when you feel quote unquote writer's block, I'll sit there and be like, you know what, I may not be able to come up with the words, but I'll go and review, because I'm one of those people that I'm not an outliner, but as I write, I create like a very extensive world Bible, because I write epic fantasy. I'm like George R.R. Martin. I have hundreds of characters that I want to know what they look like, names. I have to know what I have written. And usually I find that if I feel quote unquote writer's block, is because there was something I did not flesh out, and I review and organize my notes, and then I'll come across something. I'm like, wait a minute, I need to expand this out a little bit more. And then that sparks inspiration to go back and write more.
Yep.
Do you outline? Do you plot? Do you get world building books? Like where? Because
Well,
she's like George R. R. Martin.
There are plotters and there are pantsers. I'm a plotzer. So I write down every single thing I can think of about the book that I want to write, or the short story I want to write, and character development, bits of dialogue, description of ideas. And before I have gotten 6 pages, I'm already writing. So it becomes this amalgamated mass that I put in order. I flesh it out. I find where my beginning is, and I use it as a kind of an outline. But it looks like such a catastrophe, but for me, it's a process. I write until I have no more creative in my mind, no more ideas to put down, and that kernel forms the basis for my next book, because it's all of my spark of inspiration. And you have to write it all down when you get it, because you'll never get it back. So I go from there.
Do you keep, so when you're writing series, do you go back and read the previous book, or how do you move forward?
I not only have a story Bible, like Vanessa was saying, with all of my details of what people are, how they're related to each other, what they look like, the things they enjoy, the people they've met, and when, because that's important too. But I work with both of them. I do reread my books because you're going to make a fundamental error if you don't. You're going to forget that they already met this person that you're introducing them to for the first time. That happened, unfortunately, with the book that I did write as a follow-up to someone else's book who couldn't write the next one. You want to make as few mistakes as possible. Someone will call you on it. The fans are very, remember how smart science fiction and fantasy fans are.
Yeah, no, I was going to say you write sci-fi, and that I don't envy, because sci-fi fans to me can be some of the most particular, in a way, on points in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fellow writer who was a physics professor say, because I don't have a background in science. Everything that I know about science, I'm an autodidact. I taught myself. I read things. He said, you have an instinctive understanding of physics. And I thought, wow, I never thought about it that way, but he obviously felt that I did. And I was very flattered, but it meant that I could absorb concepts that I did not have a formal education for. Mm-hmm. So these things I always make notes of. Go back and research the following topics. Find out what they ate, find out how they dressed, find out what, if it's a historical period, what the climate was like, what interaction they had with other countries or other tribes or other people. And all of this is along the way while you're putting in the initial, once the inspiration is over. I wrote I have it someplace, I'll have to figure out where it is, 13 steps to writing a novel. And the first is inspiration. And at least 2 of the following ones are more research and more research.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do it.
Research is the most, I think, is the best place to go. Like, even like, it doesn't even have to be for fantasy and sci-fi, even contemporary. If you just do some like real world history, it sparks ideas to expand your scenes that you never thought possible. And you should always not make it make it like a daunting experience. It should be exciting, because who doesn't want to dive deep into their scenes and make it feel so realistic?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And something will stir your imagination like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also you'll throw your reader violently out of your story if you say something, even about modern times, and that's not an accurate statement. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, in Tampa Bay, there is not a lot of public transit. That's not a thing there is in other large cities. So if you're talking about getting on the train and going blah, 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 everybody who's from this area will go, what the hell are they talking about? And then you've thrown your reader out of your story. It's like the worst part about storytelling is if something you do pushes that reader out and mm-hmm. they're not immersed anymore in what you're saying. Right.
If it's moving fast enough, like in a movie, you may overlook it, but somebody who knows it really well is going to pick up on it. Chicagoans love the Blues Brothers, not just for the fact that it's a wonderful movie with good music, great characterization, and real humor, but they play merry hell with the geography. And the road that they're driving on suddenly opens out on a bridge, which is in another state, by the way, or they start out on the south side, and then 2 turns later, they're on the west side. And we think it's really funny, but it's moving really fast. If it were in a book, we would say, wait a minute, that doesn't connect. That's nowhere near that.
And out of the story you go. Do you have fans come and tell you some part of the book? I don't know what your memory, you have a very good memory just from what you've been talking. Do you have fans come up and talk to you about a part of the book and you're like, I don't remember that?
There are times when, my first book came out in goodness, 1987. So yeah, there are going to be things that I'd have to sort of revise or take a look at again. Every so often when a book is going to be put into e-format or it's being republished by another house, I have to go over the galleys again and say, oh yeah, I wrote this. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I remember what I was doing with that character. Oh, I wish I could have done more with this. The times that I like are when somebody comes up to me and they have a question, which means they've really thought about what I put down there. I had a husband and wife come up to me and ask me a question about a question in one of my Taylor's Arc books. It's, well, why did you have the character do this uh, instead of doing that? And I explained my logic, and the woman turned to her husband and put her finger in his face and said, see, I told you so. And I just loved that. That tickled me a lot because it meant that they've been thinking about it.
Do you get a lot of fan mail from your fans talking about your work?
No, I don't. I don't.
I don't know that a lot of authors do, but I think it's interesting when somebody does. I actually was lucky enough to have a fangirl moment where she came up and she was talking to me about a scene in one of my books, and she was so excited about it. And I didn't know what she was talking about. Like, I vaguely remembered it, but it was not like, it was this sub scene of a sub scene. And I was like, yay. And I was totally like, yeah, no, that's fantastic. You know, super nice to her. I wasn't going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, you know, because luckily she didn't ask me any specifics. So I didn't have to. And then I literally that night I got home and I pulled open the book and I'm like, oh, because it's some part, it was a driver for something else. And it was like in between two important scenes. And it was just a little thing to kind of get it to go. And that little thing meant the world to her. So I always think it's interesting.
I had someone come up to me at an ALA, American Librarian Association conference. And she was so thrilled because when she was young, she read my Taylor's Arc books, which are about a lady doctor in space. And she said, it was the first time that I'd seen a woman in a story who wasn't the woman who needed to be rescued or dumb or subservient to men in any way. And she's not. And I consider Shona and her husband Gershom to be the only happily married couple in space. So, but she said, you gave me agency. And I said, wow, that was an enormous, enormous compliment. And I had written those books a long time ago, but to her, it had stuck with her all these years. And it was tremendously meaningful to me because it meant something to her. And it helped her through a situation. It helped her learn, it helped her think about who she was and take possession of her own awesomeness. So I felt really flattered.
I think that's amazing. And I think authors can have more impact on people's lives than they realize, because not everybody talks, not everybody kind of like reviews, not everybody says what they're thinking. But I think it's amazing when you do something like that and it does have an impact, which I have no doubt you've had on so many writers from the beginning to the end, just even with your career. And the fact that you do these things like judging competitions and doing workshops and stuff like that to go, I'm going to do this, kind of what Vanessa said was earlier. I'm going to help. I'm going to hold the door open so you guys can get through this door if you want to come through it with me, so you can see what it's like on this side. And I think that's thoroughly amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you very much for that. Okay, we have to wrap up this episode, but I want to know what you have so much advice to give young authors, and I would love you to dig up the 13 things that you tell. I think that would be brilliant. Please do that, because knowledge is power, man.
Yeah.
What would you tell authors that are listening to this show right now, going, what is that nugget of wisdom you want to give them?
Always say yes to opportunity. Even if it doesn't sound like something you want to do right now, if maybe it's a horror story and you've never written horror before, but it's an opportunity to submit to an anthology, say yes. I have recently done a couple of stories for graphic novels that I never thought, an anthology of graphic novels, graphic short stories. I never tried writing a comic script before, but this lovely man called Jack Holder held my hand, and I'm in these two projects now, and it was awesome. The other thing is, don't wait for somebody to give you permission. I give you permission. Go out and write the great thing. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
What is
And
your next thing that's coming out? What is the next thing fans can find you in?
oh, I'm in a lot of short story anthologies right now. The Founders Effect is coming out. Thrilling Adventure Yarns, edited by Bob Greenberger, is coming soon. The Kickstarter is going on right now, and that is where the steampunk, humorous Old West science fiction story is. And I had huge fun with that. Probably like the first one as well, which is in a book called Straight Outta Tombstone, edited by David Boop. I do a lot of short stories, so right now I'm going a little fuzzy on what else. And so have fun with it. There's lots of good things out there.
And they'll be all available when your website is your website down right now, and we'll be back
down,
up?
I think it's down right now. It will be back, but I will post notices of things coming out on Facebook. So find me, follow me, friend me.
Awesome.
Have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on our show. This has been so amazing.
Oh,
You
thank
are
you.
so amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so very kind. I've really enjoyed myself meeting you too.
Oh, absolutely. This has been, I'm a little nerding right now. You can't see it, but I'm a little nerding on this side super because I got to make Jody Lynn. Okay, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm back to being the professional host that I'm not a professional host. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, it has been thoroughly amazing meeting you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So this has been Drinking with Authors Literary Briefs. I'm Erica Lance.
I'm Vanessa Valiente.
And we'll see you next time.